The information you gather from your analysis is the foundation of your instructional design. I think you're going to find that the information learned during your analysis will be helpful as you continue to create your thematic unit. After completing the analysis phase of your project, it's time to craft an instructional design document, which is the blueprint for your thematic unit. In this document, you must outline the goals and objectives of the instruction, prerequisites and learner characteristics, testing and evaluation strategies to be used in the instruction, feedback mechanisms that will support testing and evaluation, practice activities to be used in the instruction, including feedback strategies, examples and non-examples of the procedure or concept, introductory presentation of instruction, motivational strategies to be used in instruction, and basic plans for instructor materials. Outline is the key word here. In this phase, you are not fully developing your lessons and the content, but you are starting to design or outline what you want your instruction to look like. So by the end of this presentation, you will understand and identify the different components of the design phase, and more importantly, what your design document should look like. So let's start with the goals and objectives of the instruction. In your analysis document, you created a learning goal for your thematic unit. In the design document, you need to restate your learning goal. This can be copied and pasted from your analysis document. This is to remind yourself what your overall goal is for the thematic unit. You also need to decide what your learning objectives are going to be for the different lessons in your thematic unit. Remember that your thematic unit needs to be 5 to 6 lessons, so that means your design document needs to have at least 5 to 6 objectives, basically one for each lesson. In the analysis document, you completed a task analysis. You can take that task analysis and transform it into objectives. So use that task analysis as you start constructing those objectives. Educators, I'm pretty confident that the idea of learning objectives isn't anything new. However, we do have a video that talks more about objectives, and it reviews what our expectations are for the objectives in your lessons. So I'm not going to review the objectives right now. So if after this video, if you will watch that objectives video, it'll talk about objectives with an ABCD format. And that ABCD format is what we're going to look for when we grade your objectives in your design document. So after stating the goals and objectives for your thematic unit, you need to describe any learner prerequisites. So what prerequisites must your learners meet before starting this thematic unit? What background knowledge should they have? We're going to look at an example. Prior to starting this unit, students must be aware of symbols of the United States. Students must be able to identify the American flag, recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and have basic knowledge of the events that created America. Students must be able to write sentences, identify colors, and read at a level K. Basic computer skills for research and word processing are also required. So for this particular thematic unit, this is what her students need to be able to do or know before she can successfully start teaching it. You also need to identify the attitudes and characteristics of your learners. You've gotten to know your students in the analysis, so what does that mean moving forward? How does the attitudes and characteristics of your students affect your unit? With the information that you found out during your analysis, what were their learning levels? What were they like? When you gave a pre-test, what did they know about the topic prior to actually teaching it, before you're starting to teach it? The information that you use, if you surveyed your students in that analysis document, use that information here, especially if it ties directly to the unit that you're planning to teach. So here are 2 examples. I started off this unit by administering a general math attitude survey. Then I asked more detailed questions about fractions. When surveying my class of 22 students, only 3 knew anything about fractions. Some even responded with, "I think fractions are like a multiplication table." Although most students had a vague idea what fractions were, they couldn't explain it. Another example. I'm not going to read it word for word, but you can see where she has the learner prerequisites, so what the kids need to know before she can teach the unit. And then here are the learner characteristics of her class. So I'm going to pause so you can look over this section. So one thing with this example, if you read through the learner characteristics, she really doesn't say anything about their attitudes for this particular topic. That is one thing I would have liked to see, but a lot of the information for this section for learner characteristics she got from her analysis document. So don't be afraid to use the information you've already gathered, but then see if there's anything more specific to your topic that should be added here. The next thing, are there any prerequisites required for you, the teacher? It's a given that you need to be able to know about the topic that you're planning to teach. So you don't have to say, I need to know about the Civil War. But are there any specific skills or any specific strategies that you need to be aware of? Like an example of this for me as an ed tech is if I'm planning to do a training, and this actually just happened to me, I was doing a training on the program Gizmo, but before I could teach that lesson, a prerequisite for me was I had to contact that company and find out how these teachers get their account set up. Because in the training that I was at, all that information was provided to me by the person doing the training. And so as an instructor, my prerequisite was I had to know how those teachers got their account set up. Because it wasn't just teaching them the content, there was a specific strategy or a specific way the teachers got their accounts. So this section, if you don't have a specific section for prerequisites for the instructor, you're not going to get marked off for that. However, this design document is a chance for you to think, okay, I'm the teacher. Is there anything specific to this unit that I need to make sure I know, I can do before you teach it? Next, you need to identify testing and evaluation strategies. Your objectives can help with this. So you need to think about what strategies you want to use. Some examples, you can provide formal tests, a performance assessment, a project of some sort, a website. An example of a website is have the students actually create a website on the topic that they're being assessed on. There were students at Sprucewood Elementary who were doing country reports, and the teacher, rather than having them write a paper or create a poster board, she actually had her students create websites using Weebly on specific countries. And everything that they would have been asked to write about in a report, they had to include on the website. So it's a different way for this teacher to assess her students and determine whether or not mastery has been met or if they're fulfilling the requirements for the assignment. You can also do observation, or you can in fact have your students write an essay. So as you're outlining this thematic unit, as you're going through this design document, you do need to think about what testing and evaluation strategies you plan to use at the end and also throughout the unit. So here's an example. I'm going to pause so you can read through this, but here's an example for this unit as heat, light, and sound of what testing and evaluation strategies will be used throughout. So you need to plan to use testing and evaluation strategies that will help you determine whether or not your students are meeting the objectives. You also need to identify the feedback mechanisms that will support your testing and evaluation strategies. There will be another part of this design document asking for types of feedback you'll be giving during lessons, but you do need to identify specific feedback that will tie to that testing and evaluation. So an example here, in addition to daily oral feedback from the instructor during activities, students will receive written feedback on the daily self-assessment form that shows the scores from the teacher's daily student performance rubrics. This will allow students to evaluate their behavior and performance daily, so they can improve scores for the remaining days of unit instruction. So this is one example. Here's another. And then one more example. So in this example, you can see the testing and evaluation strategies on top, and writing them this way is great. Bullets are fantastic. Once again, it's an outline, so you really don't have to fully develop these tests or evaluations yet. You're giving me an idea of what it's going to look like. And then below is the feedback mechanisms that's going to support those testing and evaluation strategies. So moving on to planning your instructional strategies. A big chunk of design is how you are actually going to teach this unit. Once again, you're not fully developing your lessons or gathering your materials yet, or even creating the materials yet. That's going to come in the next phase, the development phase. Right now, you're just creating that blueprint. So during this blueprint, or during this creation process, you're going to be mapping out the scope and sequence. You're also going to select a course format. So how will this course be taught? Will this be an in-person class? Is it going to be an online class? In many situations, the course format has been decided for you. For most teachers, the course format is in-person, face-to-face. However, there are situations for educators where the course format would or could be online. It could be a blended learning format. It could be where you do a lot of online stuff as well as in-class activities. Another part of course format is how the information is going to be presented. Is this going to be lecture? Is it discovery? Is it a problem-based? Is it a variety of things? What you know about your learners can help you when designing a class format that best suits your students. Methods and tactics. So what is that introductory activity going to be for your lessons? How are you going to spark their interest? A lot of us know it as the anticipatory set. What examples and non-examples are you going to provide in your lessons? What motivational strategies are you going to use during your lessons? We mentioned Bloom's taxonomy here because it takes you from lower surface activities to a deeper level with project-based learning, multimedia projects, and everything in between. It can help you think of a variety of ways to present information to different learners at different levels and in different ways. So nowhere in this design document do we expect you to quote Bloom's taxonomy. We just have it here as a reference, just that reminder that there are different ways to reach different learners. We also want to know, or in this design document, you also need to talk about the feedback strategies for the activities. So earlier we mentioned the feedback you're going to provide specific to testing and evaluation. As you're mapping out the scope and sequence, and you're going to see how some teachers have done it in just a moment, but I want to know what specific feedback you're going to provide in specific lessons. So here's an example. So this teacher mapped her design document out by lessons. So lesson 1, she listed the objectives here. She has her introduction, so the anticipatory set, the motivation strategies, what type of assessments will go with this particular lessons, what examples and non-examples she'll provide for this activity, and then the feedback she plans to provide for the specific lesson. Now this is a third grade class, so that might be why some of the examples look very basic. But for third graders, these types of examples and non-examples are crucial for them. So I only have the first lesson for this specific example, but she had the same setup for lesson 2, 3, 4, and 5. Another example, and this teacher did the same thing. So because these teachers mapped out their design document by lessons, that scope and sequence happened naturally. I didn't have to guess what they were starting with, or what lesson was starting, or where they were beginning to where they were ending. So this is lesson 2 in this specific example. You can see they have their objective, their introduction, the motivation, the activity and assessments they plan to use, any feedback strategies, the examples and non-examples. So as you're putting this design document together, I don't care how you organize the information, because I want to make sure you're organizing the information in a way that works for you, but I will be looking for the objectives, and I will be looking for that, what introduction you plan to use, the motivation, everything else in this specific example. So I think it's easier to put this design document together by lessons, but if there is a different format or a different way to organize it that works better for you, that's fine as well. So moving on to basic plans for instructor materials. I've said this a lot already. You're not actually creating anything yet. You don't need to gather these materials yet, but you need to detail, or at least start brainstorming, what type of materials you want to use or you plan to use for this thematic unit. So any packets that you may want to put together, worksheets you're going to use, are there any manipulatives or specific technology? Are there computer labs you're going to need to get reserved, mobile labs, iPad labs? So this basic plan for instructor materials is giving you a list of what you need to get ready before you teach this unit. So in the end, when you finish this design document, you're going to have a blueprint of your unit. So when it goes to actually developing your lessons, you already have that basic outline and you're just filling in the holes, you're adding more details. And the next video will be more specific to the development phase, and we'll let you know what needs to be included in your lesson plans.